The last gentleman on stage today is Erik Calder. I knew this was going to come. You know him. I had this in Frankfurt, the exact same situation, but I'm going to read it for the ones that don't know. He is a technologist with decades of experience in finance, whose customer base includes TCW, Western Asset, Thomson Reuters, MUFG, and other large enterprises. Erik's commitment to blockchain from its early inception has placed him at the center of the storm today, advising crypto space, Infium, Abaku Capital, New Ocean, and other blockchain ventures. I would just say he's a superstar. Just come up on stage.
Thank you. Gosh, so much excitement today, so much adrenaline, it's made me tired. And so many thoughts that echo in my head as I hear these amazing speeches by others here, things that I want to comment on, but I can't remember. Erik makes an excellent point, which is a kind of an introduction to my speech, actually, which is that money is the ultimate product. Money is a proxy for all other products. And our money is broken. It has been compromised. It is an illusion and a lie. And VowUP fixes this. VowUP is real money. So why I became a VowUP maximalist, it's because precisely that. I will do my speech, but that's in essence it, is we need to fix the money, and that will fix very many problems in the world. Wenn ich euch hier alle sitzen sehe, spüre ich die Hoffnung. Sorry, for the English audience, when I see you all here, sitting here, I'm filled with hope, and I mean that in a very sincere way. There has been little hope in the world recently because the problems are so complex. And at the end of the day, we understand that it has to be everyone involved, and you're all here. So this is really a sign of hope for me. Vor einem Jahr habe ich in Frankfurt vor euch gesprochen und wir sind alle noch hier. Wir sind sogar viel mehr als je zuvor. Es ist eine Ehre für mich, hier zu sein. Und ich möchte mit euch einen Teil meines Weges teilen, dem scheinbar zufälligen Weg, ein radikaler VowUP Maximalist zu sein. It is an honor for me to be here. And I want to share a little bit of my path, my serendipitous path to VowUP maximalism. A maximalist is an extremist, a fanatic, a person fully committed to a thing. This term was first used to describe a preference for Bitcoin over the myriad altcoins, as we call them, that have been created on top of this decentralization technology. There's over 20,000 coins out there. And so to say I'm a maximalist means I understand Bitcoin to be of greater value to all of those other experiments that are happening. And for a time, I was a Bitcoin maximalist. Why? Because I care about money, though probably not in the way that the average person does. My interest is in how money facilitates trade and serves as the glue in societies. And this interest was born from my involvement in finance and technology. My first job right out of high school was at a primary dealership called First Interstate. Primary dealers are large financial institutions that participate in the auctions of treasury debt held by the Federal Reserve in the United States. There's only about 30 of them in the world. I've listed them here. And how I ended up working there is a bit of a story. My father had a roofing company. One day, one of his crews made a mess. They had an accident. One of the kettles exploded and threw tar all over the place. And my father had to run and assure the client that he would clean it all up. And this client happened to work at First Interstate. And somehow the two men got to talking. And I ended up with an interview and a job. Serendipitous, right? And so my beginning in life was really at the inner sanctum of the financial world. This position led to a career of 30 years working for fund managers and investment houses, commercial banks and other large enterprises, some of which I've put up here on the screen. And this experience in the enterprise world and in finance allowed me to understand something about the enormous house of cards that we have built around money. And that also prepared me to find and embrace Bitcoin and ultimately VOW. It is said that the flutter of a butterfly's wings can cause storms and tempests. Halfway around the world, this so-called butterfly effect. The term was actually is credited to this German mathematician Edward Lorenz, whose family was here from Germany, from Geinsheim near Frankfurt. It's a term that comes from chaos theory. And it argues that within complex systems, like economies and systems with lots and lots of moving parts and lots of relationships, minor perturbations, minor changes or movements can cause nonlinear effects of great magnitude. So the idea is a little butterfly flapping its wings and it creates these storms somewhere. On screen I show the strange attractor that he's known for. I think about this phenomenon often, and I wonder at the complexity of consequences initiated by that one roofing accident. Had someone not made a mistake, I wouldn't be here standing before you 40 years later. In 2012, I read the Satoshi White Paper, the document that launched electronic money in the world. And like my girlfriend likes to say, mind blown. I was an instant maximalist. I was so excited I couldn't sleep for a week. I decided I needed to be part of this movement to support this new form of money. Why? Because as a world, we're in trouble. Because of money. Americans now owe $1 trillion in credit card debt, and 1/3 of them don't have $400 on the side for an emergency. Recently, the US government agreed to print an additional $4 trillion to stay solvent for 2 years. And every time we look, It's a credit crisis, it's a banking crisis, it's a liquidity crisis, it's recession and the specter of hyperinflation. And this idea of hyperinflation is something that you guys are familiar with. Here in Germany, in the Weimar period, I have a graph there that shows how the currency was destroyed in about 10 months in 1923. It went from 5,000 Papiermarks to $1 to about $1 trillion. So this graph shows very clearly that once governments start printing, they can't stop. Fiat is guaranteed to collapse, and we are moving in this direction. And of course, the consequence of that is a loss of faith in our leaderships, a breakdown in international trade, as we can already see with what's happening with Russia and this business of isolation, financial isolation and breakdown in relationships, to military conflicts like we have right in our backyard in the Ukraine, and to the planification of pandemics, wars, and other scarecrows that feed the surveillance apparatus, the tentacles of tyranny. But this trajectory is intentional. The people who run the planet are determined to break the financial system because money is foundational to civilization. And by breaking the money, they break our creative capacity. They destroy our power. In order to remain powerful, they need to make us powerless. So, what is becoming crystal clear to the world now is that we need a new reserve currency. We need money that is independent from the existing financial order. At the recent International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, the flurry of discussions amongst the attending nations centered around the need for a fundamentally new supranational currency overseen by a broad consortium of states operating on principles of partnership. That sounds wonderful. But we all remember how hard it was to unify Europe around the EMU, the Economic and Monetary Union. The reality is, it is hard for countries to agree on anything. India hates China because of Kashmir. The Chinese haven't forgotten the Japanese for Nanking. Poland hates Russia. Saudi Arabia and Iran need to get over their issues. Israel, well, I better not even get into that. It's an endless catalog of conflict. So, a common currency, this idea of a supranational currency based on principles of partnership, it's a pipe dream. It'll never happen. So I'll tell you what the next reserve currency of the world is not going to be. It's not going to be the renminbi, the Chinese yuan. Because imagine that the Chinese could buy things around the world with their currency. That would mean massive, massive capital flight from China. And the Chinese Communist Party would never let that happen. The reality is the Chinese are prisoners in their own country. It's also not going to be a basket of currencies like the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights. And simply because baskets don't work when their component currencies are all accelerating to zero. The Russians propose a commodity-backed currency. But the issue there is the collateral. This is counterparty risk for the collateral. Who's going to hold the collateral? So I'll speak briefly about German gold. At the end of World War II, the Germans didn't feel comfortable about the Russians, and they had 3,300 tons of gold. So they called up the New York Fed, and they said, could we park our gold with you? And they said, of course. 40 years later, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela is talking about repatriating Venezuelan gold, right? All 2 ounces that they own. It was a publicity stunt, but it got the Germans thinking, oh, that's right, we have all that gold in the United States. So they call up the New York Fed and say, hey, we would like to come and visit the gold. And the Fed says, yeah, no, we don't think that's possible. So the Germans say, wait, what do you mean that's not possible? We have the right, it's our gold. Yeah, no. So Germany's in this really awkward position now. They want their gold, right? They have the right to the gold, but what are they going to do? So then they come back and they say, okay, that's fine. We don't want to come visit, we want it back. And the answer is, yeah, no, sorry. Germany is not going to go to war with the US and isn't going to impose economic sanctions or any of this kind of stuff. So they do what the best they can do is they can negotiate, right? But we know, as of the Obama administration, that the gold isn't there. They sold it. And Obama looks around the world and says, where can we find some gold? And the answer is Ukraine. Okay, so let's go stir up some trouble in Ukraine. And then we will conveniently take all of that gold for safeguarding, and we can then pay the Germans. Right, these are the kinds of games that are played out there. So the problem with collateral is counterparty risk. It just doesn't work. Who's going to hold the stuff, right? Nobody trusts anybody else, and for good reason. It is also not going to be a world of bilateral currency trades, which are essentially barter, because barter suffers from the coincidence of wants problem. And the reality is that nations don't want to hold foreign currencies. They don't want to manage a ton of forex positions. So that got a little bit cut off for some reason. VOW is simply better money. The only real contender here is VOW. Not Bitcoin, not Ethereum, not gold, not anything else. And yes, not Bitcoin, for many reasons, including the fact that it has fallen under the control of the very elite that runs the financial system. Incidentally, that's one of the really great things that you may not all realize that was disclosed today, which is the fact that we've become decentralized. We can no longer be shut down, right? No one can show up at Bish's door in the middle of the night and say, you will shut this down, or worse, you will now start feeding us information and giving us control, right? That's no longer possible. So we are now actually, today the first time, we are in a position to be the world's reserve currency. I spend a lot of time with geopolitics. I want to understand the big picture. For me, VOW isn't just a reserve currency. It isn't just a financial instrument. It isn't a thing for transaction settlement. It's bigger than that. For me, it is a political revolutionary act. It is a response to the monstrous degree of disintegration we see in our institutions today. Our money is broken. VOW fixes this. We have very many words in our languages to describe our bonds to each other as humans. The great philosopher Kropotkin, that I'm a great fan of, he teaches that we humans, like other animals, naturally want to huddle together, to be in each other's company, for protection, for building, for the sheer joy of it. Seid umschlungen Millionen, said the German poet Schiller. Be embraced, millions. Be in each other's embrace. To fix the money, we have to unite. Today, we're facing the potential for much darker times than we have known in our generation. And if we are to survive, to thrive even, we must unite. And VOW is a union, a monetary union that allows us to collaborate in the management of monetary policy. Because money should be managed by the people to whom it's most useful, not by ivory tower tyrants and those who seek to control others. My discussions tend to focus on structure and mechanics, I guess because I'm a developer, so I think on the left brain. But there is a spiritual side to this. VOW is also an ideological, spiritual union between those of us with the desire to make the world a better place, those of us who want to leave the world a better place than we found it. It is a union between those of us committed to put an end to the extractive gluttony of the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, the Financial Community of Africa, and generally that neo-colonialist system referred to as the rules-based order. Now, this may be in poor taste, but it seems ironically appropriate to me that the girth of this Mr. Carstens, general manager at the BIS, so visually represents the greed of the elite. I'll read you some of his thinking. My message, he says, to young people would be, stop trying to create money. Because money should be in the hands of the priests, in his hands, right? Well, we're going to be creating money. We're going to be decentralizing the process of monetary creation. He says only the legal, historical infrastructure behind central banks can give great credibility to money. But if you think about it, the only credibility that money actually needs is acceptance. Every one of our merchants will accept the money that we create, and that's it. Do we need central banks at this point? Right? The answer is no. The central bank, he says, will have absolute control over the rules and regulations that will determine the use of CBDCs, the next currencies that they want to push on us. And we will have the technology to enforce that. And there it is, enforcement, and the continual threat of violence, a dictatorship of money. Well, I have personally seen the product of this greed. Years ago, an old man, as I was stopped at a light headed into the freeway in LA, knocked on my window. He was hungry. I had an apple, I gave to him. He took it with gratitude and said he would give it to someone else. He couldn't eat it. See, he didn't have any teeth. I went home and I bought a case of soups. And I carried that in the trunk, hoping to see him again so I could give him something he could actually eat. And I didn't see him again for a long time. Turns out he'd been in jail and he'd been in the hospital, and by that time I had to give away the cans. It was many, many years ago, but it still hurts when I think about this. I have seen this kind of misery in much of the world, in the shanty towns of Tijuana, Mexico, in Latin America, in Africa. Even in the city of Los Angeles, where I live, where a single home recently sold for $500 million, $500 million for a single home, I see this. And there is just no justification for this state of affairs, where 30 families have trillions of dollars and an old man has nothing to eat. It just doesn't work, and we have to fix it. This man, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, he fixed things for his country. He was born into poverty, becomes the leader of a workers' union, and eventually becomes elected to the presidency, to a government with colossal debt. The first thing he does is set up Bolsa Familia, a socio-economic program that focuses on the neediest, the people at the very bottom. He creates 13 million jobs and increases the foreign trade surplus. Da Silva is credited with having launched an economic miracle for Brazil. Lula gave Brazilians a sense of hope and demonstrated the value in redistribution of income, says The Economist. And economists all over the world said, wow. But I propose the wow was the result of a vow to make things better. It was his commitment that eventually led to the wow moment. And our commitment will in due time also lead to economic miracles. So I have a message for the parasites who have taken over our financial system. The writing is on the wall. In Aramaic, mind you. Mene mene tekel uparsim. It means, your days are numbered. You have been weighed on the scales and are found wanting. Your kingdom shall be divided and given away. And that is our job, to divide it, decentralize it, and give it back to the common man. Today we have the tools to take control back and bring about a new era of economic abundance. I care deeply about the human condition, especially as it relates to the effects of monetary policy. And I believe that VOW is the only architecture that holds the promise to change the world in a sufficiently radical way. I have become a VOW maximalist because I can see already the storms it will create. The energy, the will is there. It's here in this room. We have both the tools and the commitment it takes to change the world. Let me close by making a bold proposal. Every one of you in this audience, and those listening to this speech somewhere in the world, is a butterfly with the capacity and obligation to create storms and tempests, to create miracles. This is your destiny. Dankeschön. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ich hab Deutschland immer bewundert. Ihr seid ein Land der Denker, der Kreativen und Lenker und habt dieser Welt viel gegeben. Ich bin heute hier, um euch etwas zurückzugeben. Danke, dass ihr hier seid. I have always admired Germany. It is a country of thinkers, creatives and leaders and has given very much to this world. I'm here to give a little back. Thank you all for being here.